going to try and answer a very important question, and that question is, why does God permit or allow suffering? Now, I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but I'll do my best to try and answer this question because it's actually a very important question, which due to the lack of an inability to understand why God allows suffering in this world, many people have actually turned their backs on God because I've heard many stories being told. For instance, there's a man called Professor Walter Veith. For those who don't know him, he's a South African Seventh Day Adventist, and he's a professor. But before he became an Adventist, he struggled with the issue of why his mother suffered and eventually died. You know, why didn't God intervene? And that happened when he was quite young. He was, I think he wasn't even a teenager at the time when this happened. So he was brought up as a Roman Catholic, but from my memory, I think his mother was a Protestant, and she suffered a lot before she died, and this really troubled Walter Veith to the extent that as he grew up, he walked away from, he turned his back on God, and obviously became an Adventist later on through God's leading. But many in the world have turned their backs on God because of them personally experiencing a relative suffering, or they've seen bad things happening to their relatives, and obviously there's the issue of all the suffering that's going on around the world, whether it be wars, natural and unnatural disasters. Because what we have to understand is that there's what's called geoengineering, where the weather is being used as a weapon, and for those that think that sounds like a conspiracy theory, and it's ridiculous. I've already done a video on this where I spoke about how the weather can be used as a weapon. Yeah, so not everything that we see on TV is happening naturally. Whether it be hurricanes, tornadoes, and even earthquakes can be manipulated and used as a weapon. So not and God gets the blame for a lot of bad things that happen in the world. That's why we have this expression, it's an act of God. When something really bad happens, let's say you have a fire, a so-called, in quotes, wildfire that goes through a whole town or a city and burns everything down, like what has actually happened recently in Canada and in Los Angeles. Some will say that's an act of God. So it's almost like they're blaming God for all these bad things. But what else? I mean, this is just an intro to this video. I'm trying to explain that not everything bad that happens in the world is being done by God. God does permit certain things to happen, and sometimes God Himself will. For instance, in the burning of or the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, God is the one that destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So sometimes God does have to intervene, basically to stop sin going beyond a certain boundary. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just going to share what my understanding on this issue based on my my research and my personal experiences. I actually don't have a lot to say. All I'm going to say is I'm going to start by saying maybe that we also need to allow God to be God, for Him to be in charge of what's going on this earth, to be in control of what's going on this earth, and to be in control of everything else that God has created, because we know that God has created other worlds in which the inhabitants of those worlds have not sinned as we have. So, and in fact, that's the first thing I want to mention, that the bad things in this world are happening because of sin, because Adam and Eve sinned. So straight away there, someone could say, but should we be held responsible for what Adam and Eve did roughly 6,000 years ago. No, but we're not necessarily being held responsible for what happened, what Adam and Eve did. But the fact is, sin was brought into this world because of that one action of not believing God and then partaking of the forbidden fruit, which is actually literal. The forbidden fruit, or the tree that had the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, was a literal tree, and the fruit also was literal. Some will say, no, it's just symbolic, it's just a story. No, that actually happened. They ate fruit that they were not permitted to eat, and because of that, sin entered the world. And God had warned them. If you go to the book of Genesis, it says God warned them that if they ate of that fruit, then they would die. And of course, in there's also some will argue, God said that on the day they would eat of the fruit, they would die. They didn't die on that day, so God told lies. God doesn't lie. I'll just explain that in this way. When I've got chainsaws here where I stay, because I'm in a rural setting and we use quite a lot of wood. Right now it's cold here, we're in winter in Zimbabwe, and we're using wood in our fireplace, and also we use wood to cook. I cut trees all the time, and when I cut a branch, especially when I cut a branch of a tree, the leaves don't die straight away. But the fact that I've cut that branch off basically means that branch itself and the leaves on it are going to dry up and die, but they don't die straight away. There are different types of trees here. There are types of trees called masasa. We've got pine trees, which are very good for for roofing timbers and for making doors and other types of furniture. And we have what's called wattle trees. They all have different characteristics, and they all burn differently when they are used either in the wood stove or in the fireplace. But the fact is, when you cut a tree off a branch, that branch is basically dead. We know it's dead because it's been cut off from its source of food and water. So I would say that's the same as when God said to Adam and Eve, in the day that you shall eat of the fruit, you shall die. And also don't forget that it says that to God, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. So when he said that in the day that you shall eat, you shall die, and then we saw Adam and Eve and all their children and their offspring living for hundreds of years. You notice that none of them lived beyond 1,000 years. So yeah. So when Adam and Eve partook of the forbidden fruit, they were almost like cutting themselves off from God, in the same way that I cut a branch of a tree with a chainsaw. There was no going back. It was inevitable that they were going to die. So sin, death, and suffering came into the world because of sin, of disobedience. Let me just say that again. Death and suffering and all the bad things that are happening in this world, they came about because of sin or disobedience. Because we know, when we go to 1 John 3 verse 4, it says that sin is the transgression of the law. And the law that's been spoken of there is the 10 Commandments. But I would also say, as well as disobeying everything else that God has said. If, for instance, this is just an example. There are many, many things that God has said we should do or not do. For instance, eating unclean food. You're being, especially when you know that God says you're not supposed to eat, whether it's pork or crocodile or any of these, no, snakes, dogs and cats, snails, all these things that God said we shouldn't eat. When you know that that's what God has said, that we should not eat those things, and you eat those things, you are committing sin. I would use this illustration to explain why God said we shouldn't do certain things. It's basically like a hedge of protection around us. It's not because God did not give us the 10 Commandments because he didn't want us to enjoy ourselves. It basically, when we are obedient to God and we do not break his commandments, we live a happier, healthier life. But when we're in disobedience, you find that even if I go back to the issue of dietary laws, the reason why God said we shouldn't eat those things is because they make us sick, and they bring disease upon us, and obviously shorten our lives. So yeah, that's why God said that. But yeah, the main issue, the reason why there's death and suffering, and even war and all these things that are going on around the world is because of sin, and that sin came about because Adam and Eve disobeyed God. But another important thing is, God created human beings with free will or choice. So even Adam and Eve, they exercised their God-given right to choice when they partook of the forbidden fruit, because God wants us to worship Him freely. He does not want us to be like robots. For Him to say, because if he wanted to, God could have done that. He could have put basically some kind of, let's just say, a microchip in our brain, so that we would constantly worship Him and tell Him that we love Him. But He wants us to do that freely, because God, that's how good God is. He's a good God. And some will still argue and say, yeah, but even though Adam and Eve sinned, God could still have intervened, and He can still intervene even today and stop all the bad stuff that's going on. But what we need to understand, that God will, at some point very soon, as you can see with all the stuff that's going on around the world, with the wars and the genocide that are happening in Gaza, the war in between Ukraine and Russia. There's even a war that's been being fought, that has been going on for a few years now in a place called Myanmar, also known as Burma. Where the government is fighting against rebel forces, and it's not really reported on that much. But yeah, there's been a war in Sudan, and there's also a long-running war that's been going on in the DRC, mostly being fought because of the issue of resources and stuff like that. That's being fought pretty much from the time that Patrice Lumumba was assassinated. Yeah, there are wars going on all over the world, and skirmishes here and there. And even recently, we've had Pakistan and India, starting to basically fire missiles at each other. So the reason, and so I was talking about why God doesn't intervene. I mean, maybe yes, sin entered the world, but why does God allow bad things to happen? Is because God also has to allow sin to manifest itself, and so that everyone can see the results of sin, not just to us, the inhabitants here on this earth, but to the other creatures that He has created in other worlds. It actually clearly says that in those creatures, that there are other worlds that He has created. They are all looking down on this earth to see what the results of sin are. Because if you go to the book of Job in chapter 1, it says that there was like a conference or a summit that happened in heaven, and there were different Lucifer was there, and Lucifer represented the earth, because he claims that this place is his, and there were other representatives from other worlds who were also gathered there as well. So let me just read what I wrote here, so I don't rumble on. But so God is allowing the fruits of sin to manifest themselves, because He has been accused of being a tyrant by Lucifer and the fallen angels. Yeah, so we need to bear that in mind, that God was accused of being a tyrant. No, so someone could say, where does it say that in the Holy Scriptures? Yeah, we can put two and two together sometimes. God has been accused of being bad, and we even have books that outside the Holy Scriptures that tell us this. Like, for instance, if you go to the what's the book called? A Trip into the Supernatural by Roger Monroe, where basically Roger actually became a member of a secret society, and found out some secrets about what Satan and the fallen angels were doing. But he came out and became a Seventh Day Adventist. This was just after World War II, I believe, and so Roger's late now, but he revealed some secrets about the things that the devil and his demonic angels have been doing and are planning to do, and yeah, so we know through the scriptures and other books that the devil definitely accuses God of not being fair and all this stuff. So if God had basically destroyed Lucifer and the fallen angels, whilst all these inhabitants of all these worlds were watching, then it would have looked like Lucifer was right in accusing God. So God didn't destroy Lucifer and the demonic angels because of that reason, and maybe some other reasons as well. But I was just saying here that God is allowing the fruits of sin to manifest themselves because he has been accused of being a tyrant by Lucifer and the fallen angels. He wants the whole universe to witness what the fruits of rebellion and sin are, so that when he puts an end to Satan's reign on this earth, there will be no one, human or angels or beings from other worlds, that will accuse him of being a tyrant or unfair. So this thing has been going on now for a long time. To God maybe it's not a long time because a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years like a day. We know that roughly the this earth and the inhabitants of this earth have been around for about 6,000 years. We know that from genealogies and stuff like that. But maybe the other worlds that I've already mentioned that are out there, maybe were created before this earth. But the inhabitants of the other worlds have been looking at and watching what's going on here on this earth, and to see whether Lucifer is right or whether God is right. Now, yeah, so someone could still say, yeah, but if God is love, like the Holy Scriptures say, then no, he should still do something. Well, actually, God basically intervenes in what's going on in this world, I would say, every day. Because this world is very big, I'm in Zimbabwe. I don't know everything that's going on around the world. God definitely intervenes every day. The very fact that I'm here, still breathing and talking to you guys, just shows how loving God is. He could snap my life out, at any moment if he wanted to, because I'm a sinful human being. And even for all those who are watching, I just wanted you to know that you are sinful and you are imperfect, and God is perfect. And if he wanted to snap out your life, he could do that, but he doesn't. Even as wretched as we are, and as wicked as we are. And I've heard many times people say, "No, I don't need to be a Christian because I'm good." No one is good. Only God is good. But he allows us to continue to have life, and even some of us to live up to a very old age because he is good. And so I was just talking about the point about the fact that some, especially atheists and those who are not Christian, and even us as Christians, sometimes we say, but in that particular incident where this baby died, why didn't God intervene? God is intervening every day in human affairs. The problem is that we normally, especially for those who watch TV, I don't watch TV, but when I used to watch TV, and even in reading, it was said that bad news sells. It sells newspapers and stuff like that. We and even as human beings, we do have a tendency on focusing on negativity, on negative things, on negative news. So even earlier on, I referred to the natural and unnatural disasters that occur around the world. We seem to hear a lot about bad things that are happening, wars, rumors of wars, and all these extreme weather events, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. We tend to hear about that a lot. But if we really pay attention, I mean, there are lots of testimonies even on YouTube where people are giving their lives to God every day because the fact that he has intervened in their lives and he has revealed himself to them. God is constantly acting and doing things in the world, whether it be saving lives. We hear of train crashes, we have plane crashes, and sometimes we have survivors in plane crashes, and sometimes we don't. But yeah, God is intervening every day. God is saving lives every day. He's providing for us every day. when you have a meal, just remember that it's not through your own efforts that you have that meal. It's because God is basically giving you the strength to work to get money so you can buy yourself food and have drink and have a roof over your head. So these interventions that I was talking about, we actually call them miracles. Yeah, God performs miracles every day, and God actually speaks. Yes, he's constantly, he has spoken and is continuing to speak to people in their dreams and in visions, even up to today. So God is not like far away somewhere. That's God is actually very close by. Like I said in my videos where I was talking about the origins of the heliocentric spinning globe Earth, I explained that God is actually his throne is above the earth. He's not very far; he's very near, and he's watching and he's concerned about everything that's going on. But there's actually a verse that says that sin or iniquity has separated us from God. God is perfect and pure and sinless, so he cannot, like right now, come into my car and sit next to me, because even that basically would also cause me to die straight away, because I'll be vaporized basically, because no man has seen God, as it says in the New Testament, because we're sinful. So he can only intervene in certain ways. He can, sometimes he sends his holy angels, which there are many testimonies about that. What I'm trying to say is God is intervening in human affairs every day. The fact that we don't hear good things doesn't mean that God is not doing anything. God is actually a very active God. He's always doing something, sending his holy angels. He's already sent his son. Even Jesus has been seen actually physically by some people in different parts of the world. And he appears to them to give them a message or to intervene. Especially, there are many stories that have been told on YouTube. There are testimonies where people have been arrested for committing crime, and then when they are going through the court process, when they're going through prosecution, Jesus has appeared to some of them, and some of them he has appeared to them in prison or spoken to them in prison, and basically, forgiven them, and they've actually left jail way sooner than they were supposed to. So God is for someone to accuse God and say, but point a finger at God and say, no, God is not good because he's allowing bad things to happen. Well, you are there actually speaking and breathing, and your heart is pumping, and your lungs are working, and your brain is working. That is all because God is good and is allowing you to live. So that's a false accusation. We should not allow the negative things that happen in the world to overshadow all the good things that do happen. There are many miracles that are happening around the world. So a very good verse here that I've got, which also explains why sometimes you hear, oh, that person, someone's so and so died. I don't know why this person died, because they were so good. Remember that only God is good, actually. But that doesn't mean that God allowed that person to die because he hates them. No. Listen to what this verse says. It's Isaiah 57 verse 1. It says, the righteous perish. So a righteous person is a good person. The righteous perish, and no man layeth it to heart. And the merciful men are taken away. Though men and women who are merciful, they die and are taken away. It says, none considering that the righteous is taken away from the evil to come. So sometimes God actually allows a righteous person, someone who is doing their best, to honor God and to please God, he allows them to die, because he says in this verse that there's actually evil coming upon the earth. And then maybe if that person was allowed to live longer, they would actually end up backsliding and becoming evil, because people change. You can have a righteous person changing and becoming a wicked person and then losing their salvation. So sometimes God allows the righteous to die so that they do not see or are not affected by the evil to come. I just wanted to also mention, King Hezekiah, the one who was told that he was going to die, and to put his things in order, and he was going to die. He cried and prayed to God and asked for for more time on this earth, and he was given 15 more years. But what did he then do when he was given more time? When the Babylonian ambassadors came to see him, he showed them everything in his kingdom, all the gold, all the silver, all the precious stuff. And then later on, the Babylonians came. This is after Hezekiah died, obviously. The Babylonians came, and they basically conquered Israel and took all that stuff that Hezekiah had showed them. So sometimes, we complain and say, oh, but why did God allow this child to die, a baby to die, this good person to die? Is because God is allowing that person to die because he knows that the days that are coming are evil, because he knows our characters. He knows whether we can actually go through the evil that's coming upon this world without losing our salvation, or if he allows us to live longer, maybe we'll lose our salvation because we're going to get caught up in what is happening. For instance, with this pandemic, there are so many Christians that failed the test, who trusted the authorities more than they trusted God, and partook in things that are not, Christians are not supposed to partake in, and put more authority in the authority figures than they did in God. So yeah, that's my maybe explanation of why I think God allows suffering in the world. I know that, for instance, the issue of sin, that's something that can't be argued about. Along with sin, they came suffering and death, and death is inevitable. None of us can run away from death. That's why during this pandemic we should have just remembered that that no one can run away from death, and there was no point in actually even taking part in the whole psychological operation, which is what this pandemic was. So yeah, we need to have more trust in God. We should. I did a video on the 144,000. For those who haven't watched it, maybe you should go and watch that, where I explained that we should be, the 144,000 basically are God's remnant people here on this earth, who will be keeping in His commandments, all 10 commandments, including the Sabbath, and will not be taking part in any of this stuff that's going on around the world. All this fear mongering, about the climate, climate change hoax, and this pandemic, and all this stuff that's going on. So the point I was trying to make is we should be so faithful to God that we are not willing to even sin against God, to the extent that we are willing to die whilst being faithful to God rather than sin against God. So we should not be so scared of dying that we actually end up committing sin against God and taking part in things that he has not commanded us to take part in. Let us all be faithful. There's a verse in Revelation that says, "Be thou faithful unto death, and you shall receive a crown of life." If we die having faith in Christ, then Christ will always resurrect us. But we're not supposed to go against God's commandments and take part in things that we've not been commanded to do, and be the same as everyone else in the world who doesn't. Some of them don't even believe in God. The atheists, those of different false religions take part in some of the stuff that's going on around the world, and we as Christians are also there taking part as well. So what makes us different then? So yeah, that's my take on why God has allowed suffering on this earth for the past 6,000 maybe plus years or so. I hope that helps for anyone maybe who's been having questions as to why certain things are happening, why relatives are dying, why babies are dying, why there's so much war and suffering and death. I mean, even small things like some people don't have access to clean drinking water. Why is God allowing that? Well, we forget all the good that God is doing. I have access to clean drinking water. I've got a roof over my head. I've even got transport. I've got 2 cars. I'm sitting. I live on a large piece of land. I've got wood on this property, and there are many who also have these blessings, but at the same time we continue to blame God and point the finger at Him. And it's and also something else that will happen as well is that in the video is that I also have some questions, not necessarily to do with sin and suffering and death, but I have questions as to why certain things have happened in my life, mostly negative things. Like once again, maybe because we're focused on negative things, we will have an opportunity to ask God why those things were allowed to happen. So we just need to be patient, because the time is coming when God is going to put an end to everything that's happening in this world. But let us remain faithful and true, and read our Bibles every day, and some of the answers are already in there as well.